Okay, off the top from the I-Team, some violent criminals now have a shot at getting out of prison earlier than expected. And it comes as a shock to the Cranston family of a murder victim. Hello again, everybody. I'm Gene Valicenti.
It's good to have you with us tonight. I'm Patrice Wood. The I-Team's Brian Crandall picks up the story he started at 5 o'clock tonight with what a recent court decision means for this case and its broader impact, too. Brian?
Patrice, Gene, Nicholas Gianquitti shot and killed his neighbor in Cranston 17 years ago. He has a parole hearing next week. Now, that's more than 7 years earlier than previously scheduled. It's part of the fallout from a state Supreme Court ruling that found the Department of Corrections, apparently for years, was wrongly calculating parole eligibility dates for some serious criminals. 17 years after he shot and killed his neighbor in Cranston, Nicholas Gianquitti is up for parole.
Now, that just creates a whole general feeling of anxiety and fear and panic.
Lisa Pagano and other family members were there when Gianquitti shot her brother Jim, a firefighter, in the dispute at his son's birthday party. Gianquitti, a former Providence cop, claimed it was self-defense, but he was sentenced to 20 years for second-degree murder, plus a life sentence for using a gun. Gianquitti had an initial parole hearing 5 years ago on one of the sentences. His next hearing was not due until 2032. But now it's next week.
The general consensus of the feeling was why? Why is this happening?
A state Supreme Court ruling last summer is why.
I feel like it was done without really looking at the victim's family.
In a case about granting early release to young offenders under a new state law, the court also found Rhode Island's Department of Corrections had been wrongly calculating parole eligibility for inmates who were serving life plus another sentence, like Gianquitti. The court ruled those inmates are eligible for parole after serving the minimum time of both sentences. So for Gianquitti, that's 10 years of the life sentence and just under 7 for the murder. Add them together, it's just under 17 years, right around now. Before this court decision, corrections officials were making such inmates win parole on the first sentence before starting the clock on the next one. The Supreme Court's ruling states we see no statutory authority for this ad hoc policy. Lawyer Sonia Dio worked on the winning side of that case.
It created sort of this really weird situation where you could end up being held for a significantly longer period of time before you'd be able to go before the parole board.
No one from the Department of Corrections would talk to me on camera. As for being told its calculations had been wrong for years, the corrections spokesman wrote to me simply, "We respect the decision of the court." The DOC could also not tell me the number of inmates whose parole eligibility dates have now been changed. Lisa Pagano was clear on what this means to her family.
It's scary knowing that this guy he's a killer and he could be walking amongst us.
What do you say to people who are like, wait, now these people are getting out earlier, this isn't the way it should be?
Well, one is that's how the sentences should have been calculated to begin with. Second, and I can't say this strongly enough, I have great faith in our parole system and our parole board.
A parole hearing does not mean an inmate will be released. The parole board still has the final decision if a prisoner like Gianquitti gets out.
I know that's not any sort of solace to somebody that's lost a family member. However, the idea of our system is to help rehabilitate offenders. I mean, there is a punishment part of it, but ultimately, these guys are going to get out at some point.
Now, she also says the court ruling will mean more prison time for some inmates because they won't accrue good time credits behind bars. And Nicholas Gianquitti, through his lawyer, declined an interview with us. He was briefly a cop, got a disability pension years before that murder, and is still collecting that pension from the city of Providence as he sits in prison. $837,000 in benefits so far. I'm Brian Crandall, NBC 10 News.